The storms came and went like wandering ghosts, howling across the desolate surface of HFY 9, a planet long abandoned to the yawning emptiness of space. Its scarred surface bore the marks of wars forgotten even by those who had fought them, a graveyard of shattered stone, crumbled spires, and deep gnarled fissures that bled streams of molten rock. Rian Derrick tightened the seals on his environmental suit, his breath a faint echo in his helmet. The readouts on his visor flickered with endless data, the acidic composition of the storm, seismic activity below the surface, and the precise coordinates of his current dig. He wasn't here for relics of battle, those sold for cheap credits in galactic markets, snapped up by warlords with nostalgic bloodlust. No, Ryan hunted whispers of the old galaxy, the time before empires, when science and power had been indistinguishable from magic. Ahead, his scanner pulsed faintly, painting the landscape in shades of green and blue. "Gotcha," Ryan murmured, his voice muffled in the emptiness. The signal was unlike anything he'd seen before, a lattice of energy woven so tightly that his instrument struggled to define its boundaries. It wasn't a structure, not exactly, nor was it the usual rubble of collapsed civilizations. It was something else. He pushed forward, boots crunching against the brittle surface as the winds clawed at his suit. The storm thickened, turning the world around him into a swirling haze of rust red and gray. When he finally reached the source, the air seemed to shift, growing heavy, oppressive, as though the planet itself were holding its breath. And there it was, the cage. It was a thing of impossible beauty and cruelty, a sphere of gleaming light suspended above a cracked platform. The structure was etched with runes that glowed faintly, their shapes shifting when viewed from different angles, as though resisting being fully understood. Thin streams of energy pulsed between the glowing lines, forming a lattice that hummed with the rhythm of a heartbeat. Inside, seated motionless, was a figure. At first, Rian thought it was a trick of the light. Her form was luminous, her crystalline skin catching the faint glow of the runes and fracturing it into shimmering rainbows. Her hair, black as the void between stars, floated around her as though caught in an invisible current. She wore no armor, no signs of rank or allegiance, only a simple garment of deep silver that seemed to absorb the light around her. Her eyes opened, meeting his. Ryan stumbled back, his heart hammering against his ribcage. Those eyes, they weren't human, weren't anything close. They burned with the intensity of supernovas, twin galaxies swirling in their depths. They held neither malice nor welcome, only an unyielding weight that pinned him in place. She spoke, but no sound came. Her lips moved, forming words that evaporated against the shimmering barrier of her cage. "Are you alive?" Ryan asked, his voice rough as he activated the comm relay in his suit. Her head tilted, the motion eerily slow, like a predator studying prey. Then, with deliberate precision, she raised a hand and pressed it against the inner surface of the barrier. The runes flared brighter, the hum of the cage growing louder. Ryan hesitated, his mind racing. Whatever this was, it wasn't natural. This wasn't just technology. It was something far older, far stranger. He reached for his scanner, directing it toward the cage. As the device whirred, the woman's expression shifted, just slightly. A flicker of something passed over her face. Recognition, then urgency. She mouthed another word, her eyes boring into his, but Ryan couldn't make it out. The scanner beeped, its readout cascading across his visor. The energy signature was off the charts, the materials unidentifiable. A warning flashed in crimson. Hazard level critical, unknown interference detected. "What the hell are you?" Ryan muttered, lowering the scanner. Her hand remained on the barrier, and now Ryan saw it, the faintest cracks spreading outward from where her fingers pressed. The runes flared again, violently this time, their patterns shifting as though fighting back. The hum of the cage turned into a sharp, piercing tone, and the ground beneath him trembled. "Stop!" he shouted, instinct overriding logic. "You'll bring the whole place down!" She didn't stop. If anything, her efforts intensified. The cracks deepened, and the air grew thicker, heavy with the scent of ozone and the tang of burning metal. Ryan backed away, his boots skidding on loose rock. His ship wasn't far. He could run, leave this place and whatever madness it held behind. But something rooted him in place. Perhaps it was the look in her eyes, or the unshakable certainty that this wasn't just an accident, wasn't just another ancient ruin waiting to be catalogued and forgotten. This was a prison. And she was its prisoner. The piercing tone rose to a crescendo, and with a blinding flash, the cage surged. Energy erupted outward in a wave, slamming into Ryan and sending him sprawling. When he opened his eyes, the storm had stilled, the air deathly silent. The cage remained, whole and unyielding, but the woman's gaze had changed. She looked at him now, not as a stranger, but as something else. "Help me," she said. This time, her voice reached him, clear and sharp and heavy with desperation. And for the first time, Ryan realized he might not be the one in control. The first thing Ryan noticed was the silence. It wasn't the natural stillness of a lull in the storm or the soft hum of a world turning unnoticed in the void. No, this was a suffocating quiet, the kind that swallowed even the faintest sound and left behind an almost physical weight in the air. The kind of quiet that spoke of something waiting. Ryan pushed himself upright, wincing as his muscles protested. His visor flickered, the HUD struggling to recalibrate after the energy surge. He glanced toward the cage, or what remained of it. The woman, Valara, sat as she had before, her crystalline skin dimmer now, as though the exertion had drained her. The runes pulsed erratically, their once orderly patterns disrupted, chaotic. "Help you," Ryan muttered, his voice a low rasp. The words she had spoken still echoed in his mind, the sharp clarity of them cutting through the surreal haze of his surroundings. What does that even mean? Valara didn't answer. Her head hung low, her breathing shallow. Whatever power she'd summoned had exacted a heavy toll, and now she seemed no more dangerous than the shimmering dust that coated the ruins around her. Ryan activated his comm unit, letting the familiar buzz of static ground him. Ryan Derrick, reporting from HFY 9. Potential find of unknown origin, he began, his voice trailing off as he glanced again at Valara. Classified energy readings, possible artifact, or prisoner. Send. The line cut off with a harsh crackle. Ryan frowned, tapping the controls on his wrist. His ship was supposed to keep a secure channel open at all times, no matter the interference. But now, all he got was static. The storm shouldn't have been strong enough to block transmissions, not with the signal boosters he'd installed. "Great," he muttered, shouldering his pack and scanning the area. The planet's surface was as bleak as ever, a sprawling wasteland of jagged rock and shifting sands. The cage's glow had dimmed, and the faint lattice of energy it emitted was now barely perceptible, yet the weight in the air remained, a heavy presence that pressed against his chest and sent a chill crawling up his spine. His boots crunched against the ground as he moved closer to the cage. Valara's eyes opened, their intensity softened but still sharp enough to pin him in place. "Do you even understand me?" Ryan asked, his voice cautious. Her lips moved, the faintest trace of sound escaping. A word, a name, something untranslatable. Yet there was recognition in her gaze, a silent understanding that transcended language. "What are you?" he pressed, stepping closer despite the warning alarms in his mind. "I am." Her voice was soft, fractured, as though dragged from a place deep within her. "What remains?" Ryan opened his mouth to ask more, but the ground beneath him trembled. The low rumble was almost imperceptible at first, but it grew steadily, a deep, resonant vibration that seemed to come from the core of the planet itself. His scanner flared to life, flooding his visor with warnings. Seismic activity detected, subterranean structures destabilizing. "Fantastic," he muttered, backing away from the cage. The tremors intensified, cracks spiderwebbing across the ground and exposing faint glimmers of metal beneath the surface. And then the first sentinel emerged. It rose from the earth with a metallic screech, a towering construct of dark alloys and flickering light. Its form was humanoid, vaguely, but its limbs were elongated, jointed in ways that defied biology. Its head was featureless, save for a single glowing eye that pulsed with the same energy as Valara's cage. Ryan froze, every instinct screaming at him to run, but the thing's gaze locked onto him before he could move. The air grew colder, sharper, as though the sentinel's presence leached the warmth from the world. "Guardian," Valara said, her voice suddenly stronger, edged with urgency. "It protects the prison." "Protects?" Ryan snapped, his pulse pounding. "From what? Me?" The sentinel moved with startling speed, its limbs a blur of motion as it advanced. Ryan dove to the side, narrowly avoiding a sweeping strike that shattered the ground where he'd stood. Dust and debris filled the air, choking his breath and obscuring his vision. His hand instinctively went to the weapon holstered at his hip, a compact plasma pistol. He fired, the bolts of energy striking the sentinel's chest and dispersing harmlessly across its surface. "Of course," he muttered, scrambling to his feet. "Why would that work?" The sentinel paused, its head tilting as though analyzing him. Then it shifted its focus to Valara. "No!" Ryan shouted, firing again, this time aiming for its glowing eye. The bolts fizzled out just short of their target, absorbed by an invisible barrier. Valara raised her hand weakly, her fingers curling in a delicate, almost ceremonial motion. A flicker of light danced along her skin, growing brighter as it coalesced into a concentrated beam. The energy struck the sentinel, forcing it back with a deafening crack, but the effort left her slumped, her body trembling from the strain. Ryan didn't think. He rushed to her side, his mind racing as he tried to formulate a plan. The sentinel recovered quickly, its movements more deliberate now, as though learning from the encounter. "We have to move," Ryan said, his voice tight as he lifted Valara. She was surprisingly light, her crystalline form cool against his suit. "The storm will conceal us," she whispered, her voice barely audible. Ryan didn't question her. He turned toward the swirling haze of red and gray on the horizon, his boots pounding against the fractured ground as the sentinel gave chase. Behind them, the cage pulsed weakly, its runes flickering like dying embers. The sentinel's footsteps thundered, growing louder with each passing second. But in the storm's embrace they vanished, and in the silence that followed, something deep beneath the planet stirred. The storm roared around them like an unrelenting beast, its winds clawing at Ryan's suit and Valara's faintly glowing form. Sand and ash scraped against his visor, reducing the world to a swirling tempest of reds and grays. Yet even in the chaos, the sound of the sentinel's pursuit was unmistakable, a rhythmic pounding like a colossal heartbeat echoing through the ground. Ryan tightened his grip on Valara, who lay limp in his arms, her crystalline skin dim and fractured. Whatever strength she'd summoned to repel the sentinel had left her drained, a shadow of the radiant figure he'd first seen in the cage. She stirred faintly, her eyes half-lidded, as if struggling to remain conscious. "You better wake up soon," he muttered, his breath fogging the inside of his helmet, "because I don't think I can outrun that thing much longer." Ahead, the storm thickened, the air heavy with particles that clogged his filters and made every step a struggle. The terrain grew treacherous, the ground shifting beneath his boots as fissures opened and closed, spewing plumes of acrid gas. His scanner was useless, overwhelmed by interference, and the only thing guiding him was sheer instinct, and the faint hope that the storm might obscure their trail. A sharp vibration jolted through the ground, sending Ryan stumbling. He caught himself just in time to see a shadowy figure emerge from the haze. The sentinel loomed, its glowing eye piercing the storm like a beacon. It moved with eerie precision, its elongated limbs gliding over the unstable terrain as though the chaos were no more than a minor inconvenience. "Of course," Ryan hissed, ducking behind a jagged outcrop of rock. His mind raced as he assessed his options. Running wasn't working, the sentinel was faster, and its tracking abilities were far beyond anything he could counter. Fighting was laughable, His plasma pistol was little more than a toy against whatever shields protected the construct. That left hiding. Ryan scanned the area, his eyes narrowing as he spotted a narrow crevice in the rocks a few meters away. It wasn't ideal, but it was better than nothing. He shifted Valara in his arms, careful not to jostle her too much, and sprinted toward the opening. The crevice was tighter than he'd anticipated, barely wide enough to accommodate his suit. He squeezed through, the rough edges scraping against his armor, until he found a small hollow, just large enough to crouch in. Valara's body felt impossibly light, yet fragile as he set her down against the cold stone. Outside, the sentinel's footsteps grew louder, its silhouette looming closer with every second. Ryan held his breath, his heart pounding as the construct paused just beyond the crevice. The glowing eye scanned the area, sweeping back and forth like a searchlight. He tightened his grip on his pistol, knowing it wouldn't do much but unwilling to be completely unarmed. His pulse thundered in his ears as the sentinel's gaze lingered on the rocks, its head tilting slightly, as though listening for a sound only it could hear. Beside him, Valara stirred. Her eyes flickered open, their light dim but present. She looked at him, then at the sentinel's shadow, and her expression shifted to one of urgency. "It knows," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the storm. "It can feel me." "Fantastic," Ryan muttered under his breath. "Any ideas on how to stop it?" She closed her eyes, her brow furrowing in concentration. Faint strands of light began to weave around her fingers, fragile and erratic. Whatever energy she was summoning, it was a pale imitation of the power she'd displayed earlier. "It's old," she said haltingly. "A relic of the tribunal. Its purpose is to preserve, to protect, but it is bound by rules. Patterns." "Patterns?" Ryan echoed, his mind latching onto the word. Valara nodded weakly. "It will not harm the structures of the tribunal. If we reach one, it cannot follow." Ryan's stomach sank. Structures of the tribunal? He'd seen the ruins scattered across the planet, but they were fragmented, isolated. There was no guarantee they'd find one in time, let alone one intact enough to serve as sanctuary. The sentinel's gaze shifted again, the glow intensifying as it took a step closer to the crevice. The vibrations rattled through the rock, dislodging small chunks of debris. "We don't have much of a choice," Ryan muttered. He grabbed Valara, her frail form barely responsive, and squeezed back out into the storm. The sentinel reacted immediately, its head snapping toward them. The glow of its eye pulsed brighter, and a low mechanical growl reverberated through the air. Ryan didn't wait to see what it would do next. He ran, his legs burning as he pushed through the storm, his eyes scanning desperately for anything that resembled a structure. Valara's earlier words echoed in his mind. Patterns. Rules. The sentinel was bound by logic, by programming. If they could outthink it, maybe, just maybe, they'd survive. A sudden flash of light caught his attention. In the distance, barely visible through the storm, was a faint, pulsating glow. It wasn't natural. The light moved in deliberate, rhythmic waves, too precise to be random. "That's got to be it," Ryan said, adjusting his course. The sentinel followed, its movements more aggressive now, as though sensing their destination. It leaped over fissures and tore through rock formations with unnerving ease, closing the distance faster than Ryan had anticipated. The glow grew brighter, revealing the outline of a towering spire half buried in the sand. It was ancient, its surface etched with the same runes that had adorned Valara's cage. "Hold on," Ryan said, his breath ragged as he sprinted toward the spire. The sentinel lunged, its elongated arms stretching out like grasping shadows. Ryan dove forward, the force of the construct's attack sending a shockwave that shattered the ground behind him. He stumbled into the spire's perimeter, collapsing against the base of the structure. Valara's eyes flickered open, her gaze locking onto the runes. The sentinel stopped abruptly, its limbs freezing mid-motion. The glow of its eye dimmed, and a low mechanical whir filled the air as it retreated, pacing just outside the spire's boundary. "We made it," Ryan said, his voice shaking with relief. But as he looked at Valara, he saw something in her expression, a flicker of fear, or perhaps recognition. "This is only the beginning," she said softly, her voice tinged with both exhaustion and dread. Above them, the storm began to shift, its winds carrying whispers that didn't belong, and deep within the spire, something stirred. The storm's fury dulled to a whisper as Ryan and Valara sat beneath the towering spire. The ancient structure radiated an unnatural stillness, its etched runes pulsing faintly like the heartbeat of a sleeping giant. The sentinel lingered just beyond its boundary, a menacing silhouette pacing the sands, its glowing eye fixed on the two fugitives. Ryan leaned against the cold stone, his breath slowing as he tried to gather his thoughts. Every muscle in his body screamed for rest, but his mind refused to quiet. The events of the last hours, Valara's cage, the sentinel, the strange connection between her and these ancient ruins, unfolded in his thoughts like an unraveling tapestry, every thread leading to questions he couldn't answer. "What now?" he asked, his voice hoarse. Valara was seated nearby, her crystalline form slumped against the base of the spire. Though her light had returned faintly, her movements remained sluggish, as if her energy was only partially restored. She looked up at the runes, her gaze distant. "This place," she began, her voice soft and laden with something that sounded like regret. "It was built to preserve what the tribunal could not control, a prison and a vault, a monument to their fear." Ryan frowned. "The tribunal. You've mentioned them before. Who or what are they?" Valara hesitated, her expression unreadable. For a moment, she seemed on the verge of answering, but instead, she reached out to touch the runes. Light flared briefly where her fingers made contact, and a low hum resonated through the spire. "They ruled, or believed they did," she said at last. "An empire of order, built on laws and systems so precise they crushed anything that fell outside their design. I was—" her voice faltered. "I am a reminder of what they feared most." Ryan straightened, his interest piqued. "And what's that?" Valara's gaze met his, her crystalline eyes filled with a mix of defiance and sorrow. The unpredictable, the uncontrollable. The spire hummed louder, its runes glowing brighter. The ground beneath them trembled as a section of the wall slid open, revealing a hidden chamber within. Ryan tensed, his hand instinctively going to his pistol, but Valara rose slowly, her movements deliberate. "It recognizes me," she said quietly, stepping toward the opening. "Wait," Ryan called, scrambling to his feet. "You're not seriously walking into that, are you?" She paused, turning to face him. "You asked what now. This is your answer." Ryan sighed, his instincts screaming at him to stay put, but curiosity, and something else he couldn't quite name, pushed him forward. He followed her into the chamber, his steps cautious as the darkness swallowed them. Inside, the air was thick and cool, carrying the faint scent of ozone. The walls were covered in more runes, their patterns shifting subtly as though alive. At the center of the room stood a pedestal, its surface smooth and unmarked, except for a single object resting atop it. A shard of what looked like pure light, solidified into an angular crystalline form. Valara stopped before the pedestal, her breath hitching. "What is it?" Ryan asked, his voice low. "The key," she said, her tone filled with reverence and fear. "The tribunal's greatest weapon, and their greatest mistake." Ryan's brow furrowed. "Weapon? That doesn't exactly scream safe to touch." Valara extended a hand toward the shard, her fingers trembling. "They forged it to control the fabric of existence itself, to rewrite the laws they couldn't bend, but it—" She hesitated. "It broke them instead." Before Ryan could respond, the shard flared with a blinding light, and a wave of energy rippled through the chamber. He staggered, shielding his eyes as the runes along the walls flashed in chaotic patterns. When the light subsided, the shard was gone, and Valara stood frozen, her hand still outstretched. What just happened? Ryan demanded, stepping closer. Valara turned to him slowly, her expression unreadable. But there was something in her eyes, a spark of something darker, more primal, that sent a chill down his spine. The key, she whispered, her voice distant. It's within me now. Ryan's stomach sank. Is that good? Valara's gaze dropped, her hands clenching at her sides. It's power, she said softly, raw and unbound, and it's waking things that should have stayed buried. As if on cue, the ground shook violently, and a deafening roar echoed through the chamber. Ryan spun around, his weapon drawn, but the sound didn't come from any visible threat. Instead, it seemed to emanate from the spire itself, as though the structure were alive and in pain. Outside, the storm intensified, and the sentinel's pacing turned frantic. We need to leave, Valara said, her voice urgent. No argument here, Ryan replied, grabbing her arm and guiding her back toward the entrance. But as they emerged from the chamber, the sight that greeted them froze him in his tracks. The storm had cleared, revealing the barren landscape in stark relief, and the sentinels. Dozens of them, their elongated forms emerging from the sands, their glowing eyes fixed on the spire. Ryan's grip tightened on his pistol. You said they wouldn't attack while we're here. They won't, Valara said, her voice hollow. Not yet. Not yet? She turned to him, her expression grim. The tribunal systems are failing. The key's reactivation is disrupting everything. The sentinels, they'll only wait so long before their programming overrides their constraints. Ryan swore under his breath, his mind racing. So what's the plan? Hide here forever? No, Valara said, stepping past him. We leave. And we find the answers the tribunal tried to bury. Before Ryan could respond, the spire emitted a final, mournful hum, and the runes along its surface dimmed. The sanctuary was failing, and the sentinels began to move. The game had changed, and Ryan couldn't shake the feeling that they were playing on borrowed time. The world outside the spire was deathly still, a silence so unnatural it pressed against Ryan's ears, drowning out even the howling winds that had been a constant companion. The sentinels stood motionless, a sea of towering constructs encircling the spire, their glowing eyes fixed on the structure as though waiting for an unspoken command. Ryan adjusted his grip on his pistol, his thumb brushing the activation plate. The weapon felt pitifully small in his hand, a useless trinket against the behemoth standing sentinel outside. Valara stood beside him, her crystalline form flickering faintly in the dim light, her gaze locked on the horizon. We're surrounded, Ryan said, his voice low. They will not wait forever, Valara replied, her tone distant. He turned to her, frustration and worry knotting in his chest. You keep saying that, but you still haven't told me how we're supposed to get out of this. She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she raised her hand, staring at her translucent fingers as faint strands of light wove between them. The energy was different now, wilder, more erratic, as though the shard she'd absorbed was reshaping her from the inside out. The key's presence is disrupting their programming, she said at last. They hesitate because they fear what I've become, but that fear won't last. Ryan swore under his breath, pacing a few steps before stopping to glare at her. Then give me something I can work with, a plan, an escape route, anything. Valara lowered her hand, her eyes meeting his. For a moment, the layers of her alien grace and stoicism fell away, and she looked almost human. There is no escape, she said softly, not as we are now. Ryan froze. What's that supposed to mean? She hesitated, the flicker of vulnerability in her gaze replaced by steely resolve. The key is more than a weapon. It is a conduit, a bridge between what is and what could be. If I can unlock its full potential, I might be able to turn their power against them. But doing so will... Her voice faltered. Will what? Ryan pressed. Valara's gaze dropped. It will destroy me. The words hit Ryan like a blow to the chest. He stared at her, his mind reeling. You're serious? She nodded, her expression unreadable. The key is not meant to be wielded by any one being. Its energy is corrosive, consuming. If I use it, there will be no coming back. Ryan shook his head, his heart pounding. Number, absolutely not. We'll find another way. There is no other way, Valara said firmly. The Tribunal's creations are relentless. They will hunt us across the stars, and the longer the key remains active, the greater the risk to everything beyond this desolate world. This is the only path. Rian clenched his fists, his mind racing. He thought of the moments they'd shared, the strange bond that had formed between them despite their differences. The idea of losing her, of watching her sacrifice herself, filled him with a sense of helplessness he hadn't felt in years. There has to be another option, he said, his voice breaking. What's the point of saving you if it just ends like this? Valara stepped closer, her crystalline eyes shimmering with an intensity that made his breath catch. You saved me because you saw something others couldn't, because you chose to believe I was more than what they made me. And now, I choose to believe in you. Before Ryan could respond, the ground beneath them trembled, a low rumble that grew steadily louder. The sentinels began to move, their elongated limbs slicing through the air as they closed in on the spire. The storm, as if responding to their advance, roared to life once more, dark clouds swirling above. Valara turned to face the approaching constructs, her form glowing brighter. It's time, she said, her voice steady. Wait, Ryan said, grabbing her arm. If you're going to do this, at least let me help. Tell me what I can do. She hesitated, her gaze softening. There is one thing. Ryan nodded. Name it. Take the key, she said, holding out her hand. It was not meant for me. It was meant for someone who could wield its power without being consumed. Someone like you. The air seemed to leave Ryan's lungs. What? The key's energy is bound to the choices of its wielder, Valara explained. If you take it, you may be able to channel it without the same cost. But it will change you, Ryan. It will bind itself to your very being, and there will be no undoing it. He stared at her outstretched hand, the light emanating from her palm like a living thing. The weight of the decision pressed down on him, 1,000 questions racing through his mind. What if he wasn't strong enough? What if he failed, and the galaxy paid the price? He hesitated, his voice trembling. I don't know if I can do this. Valara stepped closer, her expression calm but earnest. You already have, Ryan. The moment you chose to free me, you set this path in motion. Now, you must see it through. Ryan closed his eyes, his mind flashing back to all he'd endured. The losses, the regrets, the endless search for meaning in a universe that seemed indifferent to his existence. And then he thought of Valara, of the hope she represented despite the darkness surrounding them. Taking a deep breath, he opened his eyes and met her gaze. All right, he said, let's do this. Valara smiled faintly, a glimmer of something like gratitude in her expression. Then take it. He reached out, his hand trembling as it met hers. The moment their fingers touched, a surge of energy shot through him, overwhelming and exhilarating. The key's light enveloped him, and for a brief moment, he saw everything. The sentinels, the spire, the storm, the stars beyond, all connected by threads of energy and possibility. And then it was gone, the light retreating into him, leaving only a faint hum in its wake. Valara stepped back, her form dimming. The key is yours now, she said softly. Use it wisely. Before Ryan could respond, the sentinels reached the spire's boundary, their glowing eyes fixed on him. The storm roared louder, and the air crackled with tension. The final confrontation was coming, and Ryan knew there was no turning back. The storm surged like a living entity, the sky roiling with streaks of jagged lightning and clouds painted in shades of fire and ash. The sentinels advanced, their towering forms slicing through the chaos with a relentless purpose, a sea of glowing eyes locked on a singular target, Ryan. He stood at the base of the spire, the key's energy coursing through him, a storm within, matching the tempest outside. It pulsed in his chest, hot and cold, chaotic and controlled, as if the universe itself had been folded and compressed into a single fragile shard. The power felt infinite, and yet it was not his. It was merely borrowed, the weight of its potential threatening to consume him. "Ryan!" Valara's voice cut through the din. She stood a few paces behind him, her form dimmed, her strength clearly fading. "The Sentinels won't stop. You must act now." Ryan turned, his face pale but resolute. "I don't even know where to start. This thing," he gestured to his chest, where the key's light flickered faintly. "It's like trying to hold back a sun. If I lose control—" "You won't," Valara said firmly, stepping closer. "The key responds to will, not chaos. It needs you to guide it." Ryan's laugh was hollow, his nerves frayed. "Guide it where? What am I supposed to do? Wave my hands and hope it listens?" Valara's crystalline eyes softened, her voice dropping to a whisper. "You've already made the choice, Ryan. The key knows your heart. Trust yourself." The words hung between them, fragile and heavy. Ryan clenched his fists, the weight of the moment pressing down on him. The Sentinels were closing in, their movement slow but deliberate, the storm amplifying their presence with every step. Time was slipping away. Taking a deep breath, Ryan closed his eyes, his senses sharpening as he focused inward. The key's energy swirled within him, chaotic and wild, but as he reached for it, the chaos began to subside, folding into patterns that felt familiar. Memories surfaced, of his father's stories about the stars, of his first flight into the unknown, of the moment he freed Valara and chose to defy a galaxy's indifference. The patterns crystallized, and with them a purpose emerged. Ryan opened his eyes and the storm around him seemed to still, if only for a moment. The Sentinels hesitated, their glowing eyes flickering as though sensing the shift. "What are you doing?" Valara asked, her voice laced with both awe and fear. "Something I should have done a long time ago," Ryan said, his tone steady. He raised his hands, and the key's light surged, spilling out from his chest and wrapping around him like a second skin. The energy flowed outward, touching the air, the storm, the ground, until it reached the Sentinels. The constructs froze, their massive forms vibrating as the light intertwined with their circuitry. The connection was instantaneous. Ryan felt the Sentinels' presence like a hive mind, an endless web of purpose and programming stretching across the barren world. At their core was the Tribunal's command: guard, protect, destroy the unworthy. But beneath that, buried deep, was something else, a flaw, a question left unanswered. "What are you?" the Sentinels seemed to ask, their collective voice a thunderous echo in Ryan's mind. Ryan hesitated, the weight of their question pressing against him. He wasn't a god, wasn't a savior. He was just a man who'd stumbled into something far bigger than himself. But in that moment, he understood what they needed. "I'm a choice," he said aloud, his voice carrying across the storm. "A chance to be something more." The Sentinels shuddered, their glowing eyes dimming as the key's light seeped deeper into their systems. The storm above began to break, the lightning retreating as the clouds thinned. The constructs seemed to collapse inward, their massive forms folding into smaller, sleeker shapes. Valara watched in silence, her expression unreadable. When the transformation was complete, the Sentinels no longer resembled the towering enforcers they'd been. Instead, they stood as beings of light, their forms delicate and fluid, their eyes no longer weapons, but windows to something new. "They're changing," Valara said, her voice tinged with wonder. Ryan nodded, his breath shallow. "They were never just machines. The Tribunal built them to enforce control, but they also gave them the capacity to evolve. The key unlocked that potential. As the Sentinels adjusted to their new forms, a single figure stepped forward, a being of light that radiated calm and curiosity. It stopped before Ryan, tilting its head as if studying him. "You are anomaly," it said, its voice resonating like a distant song. You have rewritten the code. I didn't rewrite anything, Ryan said, his voice weary. I just gave you the choice to be something more. The being nodded slowly, its form shimmering. We understand, and we will remember. With that, the sentinels turned as one, their forms dispersing into the wind like particles of light. The storm fully dissipated, leaving the barren landscape eerily calm. Valara approached Rian, her steps hesitant. You did it, she said softly. Ryan looked at her, his expression a mixture of relief and exhaustion. Not alone, he said. She smiled faintly, but the moment was short-lived. The key's light flickered again, and Ryan staggered, clutching his chest as a sharp pain shot through him. Ryan! Valara caught him, her hands steady despite her fading strength. It's too much, he gasped, his knees buckling. I don't think I can hold it. Valara's expression darkened. You have to. The key's energy must be controlled, or it will consume you, and everything around us. Ryan gritted his teeth, forcing himself to stand. Then help me, he said, meeting her gaze. We do this together. Valara hesitated, then nodded. Placing her hands over his, she closed her eyes, her crystalline form glowing faintly as she shared the burden of the key's power. The energy surged between them, a torrent of light and heat that threatened to tear them apart, but they held firm. In that moment, Ryan felt something shift, a connection that went beyond words or understanding. Together, they guided the key's energy, shaping it into something stable, something new. When the light finally subsided, they stood in silence, the world around them quiet and still. It's done, Valara said, her voice barely above a whisper. Ryan nodded, his body trembling with exhaustion. Yeah, it's done. But even as the words left his lips, he couldn't shake the feeling that the true challenge was only just beginning. The barren world no longer felt lifeless. The storm's fury had given way to a strange serenity, the air crisp and charged with quiet possibility. The spire stood as a monument to all that had transpired, its jagged edges softened in the twilight's glow. Ryan leaned against one of its ancient walls, his breath shallow but steady, the key's residual hum still faint within him. Valara sat a short distance away, her translucent form dimmed but intact. She looked less ethereal now, as if her ordeal and their shared journey had tethered her more firmly to the mortal plane. For a long while, neither of them spoke. The silence between them was not uncomfortable but reflective, the weight of their choices settling like the stillness after a great storm. Finally, Valara broke the quiet. You could have let me burn for the galaxy, she said softly, her voice carrying a note of gratitude. That's what the tribunal intended, wasn't it? For the key to consume me and fuel their control. Ryan tilted his head, watching her. I didn't free you just to watch you sacrifice yourself. What's the point of saving someone if it costs them everything? Valara's gaze shifted to the horizon, her expression distant. You don't understand what you've done, Rian. The tribunal's reach extended across the stars. Their constructs weren't just guardians, they were tools of dominion. By unraveling their control, you've changed the balance of power across the galaxy. Ryan managed a tired smile. That sounds a lot more impressive than it felt in the moment. It was impressive, Valara said, her tone firm, but it was also dangerous. The galaxy won't just accept this shift quietly. There will be factions who see the tribunal's absence as an opportunity for chaos, and there will be those who come for the key for you. He nodded slowly, letting her words sink in. The key's presence within him was no longer a burden, but a responsibility, a beacon that would inevitably draw attention. Yet, for all the uncertainty ahead, Rian felt a strange sense of peace. I'll deal with that when the time comes, he said. For now, I'm more concerned about you. Valara raised an eyebrow, a faint smile tugging at her lips. Concerned? You've been through hell, Ryan said, and now you're free, sure, but what does that even mean? Where do you go from here? She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she rose to her feet, the crystalline glow of her form catching the fading sunlight. I've spent so long in confinement that I've forgotten what freedom feels like. The galaxy I once knew is gone, its people scattered and its rules rewritten. I don't have a home to return to, Ryan. I don't even have a people. Ryan stood as well, his legs unsteady but holding. Then maybe it's time to start fresh, he said. You're not who they made you. You're something new, something they never accounted for. Valara studied him for a moment, her eyes searching his. And you? He shrugged. I don't know. I've been running my whole life, running from things I didn't understand, running toward answers I was too scared to find. But now, he glanced at the spire and then back at her. I think I'm done running. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The horizon blazed with the last hues of daylight, casting long shadows across the desert. Come with me, Ryan said suddenly, the words escaping before he could second-guess them. Valara tilted her head. Where? Wherever we need to go, he said. There's a whole galaxy out there, one that's going to need people who understand what just happened, who can help pick up the pieces. Maybe we can be those people. Valara's expression softened, a flicker of something unreadable crossing her face. You'd risk that? Traveling with someone who's been a target for centuries? Ryan smiled. I'm already a target thanks to the key. Might as well make it interesting. She laughed, a sound that was both unfamiliar and strangely beautiful. It wasn't the laughter of a caged being, but of someone who had glimpsed the possibility of a life beyond survival. All right, she said, her voice lighter than it had been in years. But you'll regret saying that when we're dodging bounty hunters and rogue warlords. I'll take my chances, Ryan replied, his grin widening. As they began to walk away from the spire, the weight of their journey eased, replaced by the uncertain but thrilling promise of what lay ahead. The barren world around them no longer felt like a graveyard. It felt like a beginning. Above, the stars began to emerge, their light casting faint trails across the endless sky. Ryan glanced up, a pang of nostalgia mingling with newfound hope. You ever wonder, he said, breaking the silence, how many people out there are looking at the stars and dreaming of something better? Valara followed his gaze. Not as many as there should be, she said softly. But maybe that can change. Yeah, Ryan said. Maybe it can. Together they continued forward, two beings bound by circumstance but united by choice. They didn't know what awaited them beyond the horizon, but for the first time, neither of them feared the unknown. The cage was gone, and so were its chains.